The galaxy always said the High Council chamber was built for greatness, but on the day Ambassador Samuel Drake arrived, it felt more like a coliseum designed for humiliation. 100 banners hung from the vaulted walls, each representing a species that had supposedly mastered diplomacy. Yet somehow the place smelled of arrogance, wet stone, and poorly concealed fear. The lights dimmed in slow pulses, imitating a heartbeat, though no one could agree whose heartbeat it was meant to resemble. Samuel simply walked forward with the calm of a man entering a grocery store at 7 a.m., sleeves rolled, tie neat, face marked with a polite warmth that made everyone uneasy. Human politeness was new to most of them. For some species, it was even classified as a weapon. 12 alien leaders perched on their raised seats like nervous vultures waiting for a feast. Among them, towering above all, sat King Zirith of the Vorkal Empire, a creature of plated muscle and ancient pride. His crown seemed hammered from meteor fragments. His glare could stop traffic in 3 states. Samuel smiled up at him, resting one hand lightly against the marble table. "Thank you for inviting Earth to this spirited gathering," he said, his voice a soft chord of American courtesy. The translation monitors trembled. Half the council flinched, unsure whether spirited was an insult. The hive minds exchanged quick pulses of alarm. Even the amphibian delegation blinked twice, a gesture reserved for funerals. King Zirith rose with a growl that reverberated across the chamber. "Humanity has been summoned," he declared, "to accept surrender or to entertain us with war." His teeth glistened like serrated glass. His voice echoed off the carved pillars until the entire room seemed carved from hatred. "You will choose one today. Choose wisely, small one." Samuel nodded once, slowly, as if considering a restaurant menu. "That's quite a strong opener," he replied, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from his sleeve. "Usually we start with greetings, weather, maybe a shared compliment about architecture. But I respect efficiency." The reptilian strategists hissed in confusion. Efficiency? Was that a challenge? The hive minds whispered across the neural link. The human is either deeply foolish or deeply dangerous. Unfortunately, it might be both. The chamber lowlights reflected on Samuel's glasses as he lifted his gaze to each species. "Before we begin," he said, "I'd like clarifications to ensure we avoid misunderstandings. Humans are prone to those. We're a bit like cats near laser pointers." A few aliens scribbled notes, trying to decipher if cats were a weapon, a metaphor, or a subclass of human soldier. Samuel offered them a small, apologetic shrug. Humor traveled slowly in space, and rarely well. Ziritha's throne creaked under his weight. There will be no clarifications. Earth has expanded beyond its quadrant. Earth has defied summons. Earth has, he paused, nostrils widening. Earth has smiled during every encounter. The last statement dripped with disdain. He jabbed a claw toward Samuel. "Why are you smiling now?" Samuel's smile softened. "Because yelling rarely solves problems, Your Majesty. And my job is solving problems, ideally without yelling." That triggered another ripple of unease. The elder species knew a human speaking gently meant something was already broken, or about to be. The amphibian technocrat leaned toward his peers and croaked. "He speaks calmly when threatened." "Humans do that," murmured the hive minds. "It is their final warning." Samuel lifted a hand slightly. "Earth is not defying anyone. We simply prefer peace." His voice dropped into a tone of sincere gravity, and that carried more weight than any weapon. "However, humanity does take survival seriously. Extremely seriously. We try to be friendly. But if forced—" He let the sentence hang like a guillotine. The council waited, breathless, yet Samuel only offered a gentle shrug, the kind you might give when a neighbor complained about your lawn. But Zirith leaned forward with an expression that made the nearest species recoil. "Speak plainly, human." "Of course," Samuel said. "If you choose war, we'll try not to embarrass you." A chorus of alien voices erupted. Outrage, confusion, frantic whispering, overlapping languages. 3 species interpreted the statement as mockery. 4 saw it as a declaration of strategic readiness. 2 fainted outright. And the youngest species, having just developed written language 70 years prior, simply stared at Samuel as though witnessing the collapse of a star. Zirith slammed both fists into the table, cracking the obsidian in a perfect spiderweb pattern. "You dare threaten the Vorkal? You dare." "I dare nothing," Samuel interrupted gently. "I'm merely explaining the consequences of your choices. I respect your authority, your majesty. Truly. But humans don't react well to ultimatums." He paused. Or to people shouting at them before breakfast. The council erupted again. Breakfast? Was this some coded term for war readiness? Was it a threat? A ritual? A biological cycle they had overlooked? The reptilian commander hissed. "Explain this breakfast." Samuel chuckled. "It's food. Eggs. Toast. Coffee. Humans function better after it." 12 species panicked collectively. If humans needed fuel before becoming dangerous, what would they be like after? The wise elder species, the luminescent Cytherians, rose slowly, glowing dimly with dread. "Human," their voice harmonized, "withdraw your jest. War with Earth would scorch the stars." Samuel bowed his head modestly, as though accepting a compliment at a family reunion. But Zirith roared, drowning out the Cytherians. "Earth is weak. You hide behind charm. You hide behind smiles. You hide behind that ridiculous tone." He pointed one massive claw. "We demand war." Samuel blinked twice. "Demand is a strong word. Are you sure?" "We are." "Absolutely sure?" "Yes." "Even after the Cytherians' warning?" Zirith leaned back. "War. Final answer." Samuel sighed softly. "All right. I'll notify my team." Half the chamber froze in terror. Notify his team? Had they been waiting? Hiding? Preparing? The Vorkal guards gripped their weapons. The Cytherians dimmed further, whispering ancient prophecies about polite humans. Samuel took a slow breath, studying the council with an expression almost sad. "You know," he said, voice lowering to something intimate, something dangerous. "Earth never wanted this. We hoped diplomacy could work. We hoped you would see past stereotypes." He tapped the cracked table gently. "But sometimes people don't listen until it's too late." The council murmured, unsettled. Something in the human's tone suggested inevitability, as though events had already been set in motion long before the meeting began. The hive minds pulsed frantically across their network. The trap has already closed. The human is simply waiting for them to realize. Zirith attempted one last display of dominance. "You believe humanity stands equal to us?" Samuel's eyes finally hardened, not with anger, but with resignation. "Equal? No." He paused. "Different. And difference can be surprising." He straightened his tie with deliberate calm. "Earth will respond. You won't like the response, but you did ask for it." The Cytherians glowed faintly. "Human, what have you already done?" Samuel met their collective gaze with a soft, unblinking sincerity. "Just something precautionary." Zirith snarled. "Speak, human." Samuel's smile returned, gentler this time, almost pitying. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice to something only the council could hear. "You wanted war," he whispered. "So before coming here, we prepared for your answer." In the stunned silence that followed, the chamber lights flickered once, just once, before stabilizing, as if the entire galaxy had inhaled sharply and forgotten how to exhale. And Samuel, folding his hands neatly on the table, simply said, "Now we begin." King Ziritha's declaration still hung in the air like leftover smoke as the chamber doors slid open with a hiss that seemed far too casual for the tension inside. Samuel Drake didn't even turn around at first. He simply tilted his head, almost amused, as 5 human officers entered with the relaxed swagger of people who absolutely should not have been relaxed. They were dressed in standard diplomatic security uniforms, polished boots, matte jackets, clean lines, but their expressions were anything but diplomatic. They looked like a group of friends who had stopped for coffee and accidentally walked into an intergalactic crisis. And judging by the steam curling from the thermos one carried, that wasn't far from the truth. The amphibian diplomat croaked in alarm. "Why are your soldiers so calm?" "They're not soldiers," Samuel replied, finally turning. "They're co-workers." One of the officers raised his cup in greeting. "Morning, folks." It wasn't morning here, and the aliens knew it. The confusion rippled across the chamber like a low-frequency vibration. The hive minds pulsed sharply. The humans are signaling something. But what? King Zirith bristled, towering over his throne. "Why bring these creatures into my council?" Samuel smiled. "Support. Moral support, mostly. And someone had to hold my coffee." He gestured toward the thermos-holding officer, who took a sip with the indifferent composure of a man who'd survived long nights, long wars and long Monday meetings. Ziritha's nostrils flared. "What is that substance?" "American coffee," Samuel said. "Stronger than diplomacy. Sometimes stronger than logic, depending on who makes it." One officer muttered, "Stronger than half the weapons in this place," earning a discreet elbow in the ribs from another. The Cytherians glowed faintly, their translucent bodies shimmering with an emotion the council rarely saw: fear. "Human," they murmured. "This smells of preparation." Samuel shook his head with polite sincerity. "Oh no. This is just routine." Which was, of course, the most terrifying thing he could say. The reptilian strategists scrutinized the human officers through narrow, calculating eyes. They found no sign of armor plating, energy fields, or visible weapons. But they found something worse: complete ease. Not bravado, not ignorance, but ease. The posture of predators who saw no threat worth acknowledging. Samuel gestured toward the council's enormous projector dome. "Now, before we escalate further, I'd like to address a few misunderstandings." Zirith slammed a fist on his throne. "We require no clarification. Humanity has chosen war." "Not chosen," Samuel corrected gently. "Accepted. There's a difference. And that difference matters, to us." He paused as if searching for the right courteous phrasing. "But perhaps you should see what you've walked into." He nodded to one of his officers. Instantly, the projector dome flickered to life. A vast holographic map of the galaxy expanded across the ceiling, lines of light tracing borders, trade routes, and planetary alignments. At first the council leaned forward, intrigued. Then the colors changed. Zones marked in blue, Vorkal fleets, blinked. Then flickered. Then turned a dull, lifeless gray. The amphibian diplomat croaked. "What does this mean?" Samuel folded his hands neatly. "It means your fleet stopped receiving navigation signals 2 minutes before this meeting began." The council erupted. The hive-minded species sent frantic pulses across their neural collective. The reptilians barked orders in their native tongue. Even the wise Cytherians trembled. Only the humans remained entirely still. Ziritha's chest expanded with fury. "Sorcery." "Technology," Samuel corrected, still calm. "Humanity has been studying your communications patterns since your first threat transmission. We thought it rude to ignore you." One officer added quietly, "Also, their encryption was adorable." The aliens did not understand adorable, which made it feel like an even deeper insult. Samuel continued, "Earth does not wish for war. But if war is forced upon us, it is only fair that we prepare. And by prepare I mean, secure the safety of our home." Zirith bared his crystalline teeth. "You mock us." Samuel blinked. "Mock? No. I don't mock. Not intentionally. Humans use humor to soothe anxiety." He gave a soft, apologetic gesture toward the council. "My anxiety seems to be doing just fine, though." The Cytherian's glow flickered with the intensity of a dying star. "Human. This is not defense. This is dominance." Samuel sighed. "No, this is courtesy. We didn't want you to trip over yourself rushing into a war you can't win." The words hung in the air, heavy, almost unbearable. The human officers exchanged one of those small, barely perceptible nods shared by people who have seen too much and still kept their sense of humor intact. The officer with the thermos raised it in a half-toast. "To not tripping," he said softly. The hive mind species whispered into the collective consciousness. They planned for this. Even before arriving they planned. Zirith roared over the panic. "This insult will be remembered for 1,000 cycles." Samuel looked genuinely puzzled. Which part? The navigation shutdown, or the misunderstanding about coffee? The reptilian commander hissed. "All of it." "Ah," Samuel said. "Then we'll need to work on our delivery." The officer beside him masked a grin. Human humor was landing exactly as intended, poorly, confusingly, and strategically. The more the aliens misunderstood, the more uneasy they became. That was the point. Polite unpredictability had always been humanity's most underrated weapon. Samuel stepped forward, the dim chamber lights catching the edges of his suit and outlining him in a quiet halo. "Your Majesty," he said, meeting Zirith's seething gaze without flinching. "You demanded war. That is not something we take lightly. You expect us to tremble. We don't. You expect us to retreat. We won't. And you expect that your strength outweighs ours." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it tightened the air. "But you have misread us from the beginning." A murmur rippled across the council. Even the youngest species, still developing their political vocabulary, sensed the shift. An invisible curtain lowering, marking the point where diplomacy ended and consequence began. Samuel gave a polite nod. "We humans are many things. But we are not predictable. We don't rise in straight lines. We don't fall in straight lines either. We spike, unexpectedly. And annoyingly, I'm told." The officer with the thermos whispered. "Especially before coffee." A few aliens flinched as though the word itself had become a threat. Samuel continued. "You think our humor is disrespect. It's not. It's habit. You think our calm is weakness. It's not. It's control. You think our friendliness is submission." He let the smile fade. "It's not." The Cytherians dimmed to a cold, fearful blue. "Then what is it, human?" Samuel's voice softened into something dangerous. "Patience. And patience has a limit." Zirith surged to his feet. "Your limit means nothing. The Vorkal Empire lost its fleets 8 minutes ago," Samuel said quietly. The room froze. Even the air felt stunned. Samuel leaned in, just slightly, just enough. "And that was before my team arrived." A single alarm tone pulsed through the chamber, a deep resonant vibration as every alien communicator blinked an identical warning symbol. The council leaders stared at their devices, disbelief turning slowly into horror. Each screen displayed the same message. "VOR Call Central Command Offline. All warships unresponsive. Source unknown." Samuel watched their faces change, sorrowful but unyielding. "That," he said gently, "was the insult you didn't understand." And as the chamber sank into stunned silence, another notification chimed. Soft, almost polite, marking the beginning of something far, far worse. The council chamber felt colder after the alerts, as if the walls themselves had withdrawn in fear. Even the lights dimmed, pulsing with the uneasy rhythm of a dying heartbeat. Samuel Drake waited a moment, letting the panic bloom just enough to be recognized, but not enough to spiral. His officers stood behind him like quiet shadows, their expressions steady, almost bored, which only unsettled the council further. Finally, Samuel exhaled softly, as though concluding a meeting rather than witnessing a political collapse. "I believe," he said gently, "it's time for a small tour." Zirith recoiled as if struck. "Tour? You dare trivialize this crisis?" Samuel offered a sympathetic tilt of the head. "I'm not trivializing anything. But clarity is important. Think of this as illumination." The Cytherian's glow flickered with dread. "Human, what do you wish to show us?" "Perspective," Samuel replied, and he gestured toward the corridor leading out of the chamber. "Please. After you." No one moved. Even the hive minds hesitated, whispering through their collective threads. Finally, with a trembling breath, the amphibian diplomat took a step, followed by several others. The Vorkal king stayed rooted, claws clenched, jaw rigid. But Samuel didn't pressure him. "Come or stay," he said. "Either way, the truth will reach you." The corridor beyond the chamber stretched like a long throat of polished obsidian, its surface reflecting distorted shapes of those who walked it. The council delegation moved in cautious silence, their footsteps echoing like nervous heartbeats. Samuel walked slowly at the front, hands loosely at his sides, posture calm, as though leading tourists through a museum exhibit. His officers followed with the same relaxed cadence. Tension clung to the air so tightly it seemed to vibrate. "This station," Samuel began, "was built on the assumption that all species operate predictably. Power is measured in fleets, territories, fiscal resources." He paused. "But humans don't operate like that. Predictability isn't our strength. Or our weakness." The reptilian strategist hissed quietly. "Then what is your strength, human?" Samuel smiled without turning. "Adaptation, improvisation, and the inability to back down when challenged. You'd be amazed how far stubbornness has taken our species." They reached a circular observation deck, overlooking the vast holographic projection of the surrounding sectors. The stars shimmered like grains of burning sugar suspended in a syrup of darkness. Samuel tapped a panel, and the image shifted. Dozens of glowing orbs appeared, each representing a Vorkal warship. The orbs flickered, then dimmed to lifeless gray. "These," Samuel said, "are your primary armadas." Zirith snarled. "You tampered with them." "With respect," Samuel replied. "We safeguarded Earth. Preparation doesn't require malice. Just foresight." Samuel tapped again. The stars rearranged, revealing a dense pattern of tiny red points scattered across the void between worlds. They pulsed rhythmically, like a network of beating hearts. The amphibian diplomat gasped. "What are those?" "Quantum proximity mines," Samuel said. "Thousands of them, seeded across 3 sectors over the last 18 months. Zirith bellowed. "Impossible." "Not impossible," Samuel corrected. "Just uncomfortably thorough." The mines glowed brighter, aligning into geometric clusters. "We designed them," Samuel continued, "to neutralize non-human biosignatures. Not destroy, neutralize. We still hoped diplomacy would prevail." One of his officers added, "Neutralize is a polite word." Samuel shot him a mild glance. "Polite is the point." The Cytherians whispered in trembling harmony. "Why reveal this now?" "Because," Samuel said, turning to the council fully, "you demanded war, and a fair conflict requires informed consent." The hive minds pulsed rapidly. Their collective thought rippled through the chamber. The humans mapped our weaknesses. They prepared long before this meeting. Their confidence is not performance, it is certainty. Samuel walked toward the far window, gazing out at the sprays of starlight beyond the station. Humans don't enjoy war. It leaves scars, emotional, generational. We are built from the rubble of our own history. That makes us sentimental, but not naive. He turned back, voice softening. "We warned you with smiles. We cautioned you with courtesy. But you mistook restraint for fear." His officer murmured, "That happens a lot." Zirith stomped forward, chest broadening with fury. "If you had such power, human, you should have displayed it earlier." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Would you have listened?" The silence that followed answered for him. He motioned toward another console. A grainy hologram flickered to life, live feeds from various border stations. Alien fleets blinked into view, drifting listlessly, power signatures faint. Automated distress signals pulsed weakly. "Our systems didn't fire on them," Samuel said. "We simply guided them into stasis. No casualties. No destruction." "For now," murmured the reptilian strategist. "For always if peace is chosen," Samuel replied. They continued down the corridor toward another observation bay. This one was darker, filled with the hum of gravitic machinery. In the center hovered a crystalline sphere surrounded by faint blue light. The hive minds recoiled. "This field," It disrupts cognitive networks. Samuel nodded. Only if someone attempts hostile psychic interference. Again, precaution. The corridor seemed to constrict with every revelation, as though the station itself feared what would come next. The amphibian diplomat bowed his head. Human, why show us so much? Because transparency builds trust, Samuel said gently. And trust is the only currency that prevents extinction. They reached the final chamber, a forward command alcove overlooking the hyperlane grid. The stars streaked in luminous paths, each line representing potential invasion vectors. Every route glowed with small human-coded markers. Zirith stared in disbelief. You charted our war paths before we declared war. Samuel gave a small shrug. We read patterns. You threatened Earth 17 times over a decade. We take patterns seriously. Threats are tradition. Zirith roared. Humans don't treat threats as tradition, Samuel said softly. We treat them as promises. The last display activated, showing a massive, dormant structure hidden in a nebula, a lattice of metallic ribs encircling an energy core. What is that? Whispered the amphibian diplomat. Defense Array Horizon, Samuel replied. A last resort. A shield and a spear. Built not to conquer, but to end wars before they begin. We hoped never to use it. Zirith trembled with rage. You would deploy this against us? Samuel approached him with quiet steps and an expression almost sympathetic. Not against your people. Only against the violence you bring. The room fell into stunned, suffocating stillness. Even the hum of the machinery seemed to fade. Finally, Samuel clasped his hands behind his back. This tour was not meant to humiliate. It was meant to clarify. You asked for war without understanding what you were asking for. He let the words settle before continuing, voice lowering to something so gentle it felt lethal. Now you understand. As the council stared, shaken to their cores, an alarm chimed in the distance, sharp, urgent, unmistakably different from the earlier alerts. Samuel turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing. Ah, he murmured, barely above a whisper. It seems we're out of time. And the lights turned blood red. The alarm's red glow bled across the corridor like a wound spilling open through metal and shadow. Samuel Drake didn't flinch. None of the humans did. But every alien in the delegation stiffened, as though the light itself carried a new and horrifying truth. Samuel gave a slow exhale, the kind reserved for moments when the inevitable finally arrived. We should return to the chamber, he said quietly. The council will want clarity. The way he said clarity made several species recoil, as if he had offered execution instead of explanation. Yet they followed him, steps shaky, breaths uneven, fear guiding them back toward the room where everything had begun. When they entered, the chamber's vast architecture no longer felt grand. It felt like a trap, one they'd walked into willingly, blind to the human who'd held the door. Zirith stood at the center now, away from his throne, claws extended, his silhouette pulsing with barely contained fury. The crimson light gleamed along the sharp metallic ridges of his armor, giving him the appearance of a burning titan. His eyes locked onto Samuel with a hatred so concentrated it almost hummed. Human, he growled. You dare cripple my fleets and parade your insolence before me? I will end you myself. His voice echoed so powerfully, the floor trembled beneath them. Samuel stepped forward, expression calm. No arrogance, no fear. Your Majesty, he said gently. Violence will not change the truth. War with humanity will not go the way you imagine. The restraint in his voice was more terrifying than any weapon. The hive minds shivered collectively, their membranes rippling like disturbed water. The Cytherians dimmed to a color bordering on despair. But the Vorkal king was deaf to caution. With a roar that could shatter bone on lesser worlds, Zirith lunged. It happened in a blur too fast for many species to fully perceive. The king's massive form surged forward, claws slicing through the air with the force of a meteor strike. But Samuel Drake moved like someone who had already studied this outcome. Someone who had accepted necessity long before the moment arrived. He sidestepped with a smooth pivot, almost graceful, hand rising not in panic but in deliberate precision. He caught the king's wrist, redirected its momentum, and with a single fluid motion pulled the ceremonial blade from Ziritha's own belt. Then, almost gently, he drove the blade upward under the king's jaw. The sound that followed wasn't a scream. It was a stunned silence collapsing inward, a vacuum of disbelief as Ziritha's enormous body froze, one trembling hand clawing at Samuel's shoulder. The blade gleamed scarlet. The chamber felt suddenly too small to contain the magnitude of what had been done. Samuel held the king upright for a breath, as if offering him a final dignity, then eased him to the floor, placing him on his back with a respectful care that made the act even more terrifying. Ziritha's chest heaved once, then stilled. The Cythereans flickered violently. The reptilian strategist stumbled back. The amphibian diplomat collapsed onto trembling knees. The hive minds released a psychic wail that rattled every panel in the chamber. Samuel simply stood, breathing slowly, wiping the blade with the white handkerchief he kept tucked in his coat pocket. "He chose war," he said softly. "And he attacked a diplomat. Under council law, that makes his death self-inflicted." His voice carried neither triumph nor malice, only inevitability. One of the human officers stepped forward. "Status?" Samuel didn't look away from the fallen king. "Stable," he replied. "For now." The room became chaos. Not the loud chaos of war, but the fractured, suffocating chaos of species finally understanding they had misread humanity entirely. The amphibian diplomat croaked through shaking breaths. Humans kill royalty without hesitation." Samuel corrected gently. "Humans defend themselves when forced. And we warned you repeatedly that we dislike being forced." His voice never rose, yet every word felt lethal. The Cythereans gathered themselves and approached Samuel slowly, bowing their luminous heads. "Your restraint before now was mercy," they whispered. "We did not comprehend." Samuel offered a faint nod. "Few do." While the council reeled, the holographic screens around the chamber flickered again. New data scrolled across them, warship registries, command overrides, geopolitical maps shifting in real time. The hive minds hissed, "Our systems, someone is accessing them." Samuel raised a hand, not in denial but in permission. "That would be Earth intelligence. They're stabilizing your fleets. Preventing panic. You're welcome." Gasps erupted. The reptilian commander staggered forward. "You mean to control us?" "No," Samuel said. "If we intended control, you wouldn't be standing." The calmness in the clarification made several species tremble. He walked to the central dais and activated the final projection. The image of Horizon, the dormant construct hidden in the nebula. Its radiant lattice expanded across the chamber like the ribs of a slumbering god. Light cascaded across the council floor, illuminating the exhaustion in Samuel's eyes. "This," he said, "is not a weapon. It's a boundary. A line we never wanted crossed." The Cythereans whispered, "And if we cross it?" Samuel looked at them with a sadness that felt ancient. "You saw what one human did to a king. Imagine what our species would do to survive." Silence returned, deeper, heavier, and infinitely more fragile. Slowly, as though carrying the weight of a collapsing galaxy, the council members approached the dais one by one. Their voices were hushed, trembling, reverent. We choose peace," said the amphibian diplomat. "We sign whatever accords humanity requires." "We recognize Earth as a protectorate force," murmured the hive minds. "We acknowledge the new balance," whispered the reptilian strategists. Samuel took their statements with no visible pride, only a calm resignation. It wasn't victory. It wasn't dominance. It was simply the consequence of forcing humanity into a corner. When the final signatures were pledged, Samuel closed the hologram and exhaled long and slow. His officers relaxed slightly for the first time. The chamber lights softened from red to white. The atmosphere eased, but not entirely. Something still reverberated beneath the surface, an unspoken truth none of the alien species dared articulate. "Before we conclude," Samuel said, turning toward the sealed entrance, "you should know something important." The council braced. Samuel's smile returned. Gentle, polite, terrifying. That alarm earlier? It wasn't a threat. The doors slid open with a metallic sigh. It was a notification. And something enormous stepped into the light.